Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Embellish Podcast. A podcast focused on product stories, product storytellers, interesting brand ambassadors, and any other tangent that I happen to come up with. Whether you're a bourbon fan, a geek, a casual observer, or someone just floating through this channel, you're sure to waste a few minutes listening to what I have to say, and I hope you find it interesting. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists, and if you don't find me on that platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com, and I'll try to get it on there. I also generally live stream the recording of these episodes if you're listening to audio on YouTube on Wednesday nights around 9:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and you can find all of my links on Instagram, at EmbellishPod, or on Twitter with the exact same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. And that is also a place to pick up these links, episode details, and even some one-off tasting notes. I can also be found on TikTok. Not really sure what that app is for, but, I'm giving it a shot and see what happens. Today is January the 26th of 2022. We don't have a topic tonight because we're actually talking about the fact that this marks officially 1 year of recording, at least from the audio standpoint. The YouTube channel has only been around for a much shorter period of time, a little less focused on whatever its goal is. Not entirely sure yet, but I appreciate everybody being a part of this. So, before we get started too much, we always talk about a few things ahead of time. One of the things that I came across there is the Seagrass 16-year release, and it's quite fortuitous for that to hit when it did, because we're in that vein of, everybody's marking Seagrass as one of their top 10 bottles from 2021, and how popular it is, and lo and behold, here comes Barrel Spirits with their 16-year version of it. I've seen a few folks that already have some. They're giving those tastes. They're giving it, wonderful reviews. It looks like it's going to be a fantastic bottle. It's just, it's tough to peel off $240 for a 16-year bottle of whiskey. I'm quite sure it's worth it, but I try to stay as close to that $10 per year mark as I possibly can get. One of the other things, got an email today. You've seen on a number of the episodes that I have, I'm a little bit of a fan of Maker's Mark, and Maker's Mark just announced today that they have, they became the largest distillery to achieve a B Corp certification. And if you're not entirely sure what B Corp is, a B Corp is a company that meets a higher standard of social or environmental performance, accountability, transparency. Just someone that's interested in being a little more transparent in what they're doing and having a minimal impact. And I've already seen people trying to make this into a political thing, or, this is wokeness at its worst. But I think, and I'm going to steal this comment from some other person, but they made the statement for a company that almost explicitly relies on nature to produce their products, whether it be because they need nature to create the water, so the water's a problem, the crops to be able to mash in, the barrels to be able to age in, or the weather patterns to be able to age in. Any of those things match up with this idea that you should probably consider your sustainability and your long-term impact on the environment to make sure you can continue doing whatever it is that you do over a long period of time. Within the context of what they've got, there's a note from the Samuels family about, what they're after. Rob Samuels actually put out a statement. You can go find that. There's a fantastic video on their website. Staying in the Maker's Mark vein, they also pushed out this week a list to the folks that are a part of the Whiskey Drop, list of the bottles that are going to be available. We already knew what the February Whiskey Drop was going to be like. The first round was the DNA bottles of the 110 and 115 proof. Next will be the 120 and 125, which means At that point, once those bottles show up next month sometime, I can run a vertical tasting from the 110 to 125 in their experiment of entry proofs. And if you don't know what those are, basically Maker's Mark is making the attempt to toy with entry proof. They've been going in at 110 for a very long time, and so they decided, hey, they've done some testing around wood and stave profiles. They've done some testing around mouthfeel, and now they're looking at other facets of aging. And one of the other unique values is that they don't rotate these barrels like they do the rest of the barrels in their rickhouses, and they're aging for 8 years. So everybody's running 8 years. It's about a year slightly older than what is going to be what's considered the oldest in the blend to begin with, because I know Makers usually does a 5 to 7 year blend to make it out. But these barrels, since they're not being rotated, are going to be aged slightly longer, and they're going to have these entry proofs. And so absolutely, yeah, the barrel availability is still pretty good here as well. And I've got some of the traditional Seagrass, but just that 16 year at that higher end price point. I have a hard time spending that because I can pick up a handful of other bottles out there. And if you see me spending $200 on a rye, it's probably going to be the Leopold 3-chamber, even though it's getting a lot of significantly negative reviews around a lot of people. I can appreciate the value of what's going on there. Hey, Bourbon Lens, and I don't know if it's which one of you guys it is, so I'm just going to leave it at Bourbon Lens. I always default to Jake, and then I realize, hey, maybe it's not him. But I appreciate you guys for being here. Thanks for the acknowledgement. Guys like you and several other podcasts, which I'll talk about a little later on, are part of the reason why I'm actually doing it and why I continue to do it. Because sitting here and speaking into the void is a weird thing to do, especially as a single guy talking. But there's been a lot of positive feedback from folks. But back to the whiskey drop. So they announced they're doing the 120 and 125 in the next round. Then they're going to do some private selections from Jane Bowie and Denny Potter. And then after that, it looks like we're going back into some more what some folks have dubbed the license plate series. So in August they'll be releasing the BRT 01 and BRT 02. I'm interested to find out what those are. Those are, those may be some unique things that they've got going on as well. And then at the end of the year, they're going to do limited edition holiday bottles. That one may be the most disappointing thing that I've come across. I'm concerned that the idea is going to be that they're just giving you the bottles that you could buy at the distillery during the holiday seasons, the one with snowflakes or whatever. And realistically, yeah, I don't mind having those, Scott. Hey, thanks for being here, Scott. And I hope it hasn't always been Scott joining for these, because I've been calling you Jake every time, and if so, that sort of makes me an asshole, and I apologize. Anyways, they're doing that. That's part of their whiskey drop. One of the things that I do for the episode is I like to talk about a little bit of news, and I've been thinking about this for a while. And Cole and Robbie from Chill Filter Podcast had me on, and they do a thing called Whiskey World News with every one of their episodes. And so I kind of tossed over to them that I was considering doing once a week, once a month, once every 2 weeks, whenever I happen to decide it, rounding up some news and kind of giving a paraphrase version of it and then my take on it, and just kind of making that a whole thing. And so what that results in is this idea that I'm going to try to kick off this coming Sunday. I'm going to call it Buzzed Feed, and it's just going to be a quick 20-30 minute segment with some news, talking about a series of things, and work through that and see what happens there. It may be terrible, it may be fun, it may be exciting. I don't know, but I'm going to do it anyways, because that's the entire purpose of this. And it is difficult to sit here. There's a wall that is about 2.5 feet from me, and I'm just staring at the wall. That's all I'm doing here. I'm just talking to myself. But I've worked in radio before, so it's a lot of the same type of thing where you're sitting in a room talking to yourself, and you sort of get used to it. But yeah, that's the long and short of it. That's where I'm heading. Is going to continue down that path. One of the other things, got some interviews scheduled. The folks from some of the folks that I've reached out to have already gotten back to me, and I've been able to schedule a few things. So next week's episode, that I have. I will likely live stream it. I'm going to have a chance to talk to Alan Bishop from French Lake Spirits, or Spirits of French Lake, and I've got I've got several of their bottles on hand. If you've ever heard Alan Bishop talk, he's a super engaging individual. He's their master distiller. Kind of got that, redneck mad scientist vibe to him. He does distillers talk, does a handful of other things. Super entertaining guy. Super excited about it. When we're gonna sit down, it'll probably be a full hour earlier than what I normally do, so we'll have to shift up an hour. The week after that, I'll have an episode where I talk with Chris Blattner of the Bourbon Charity and also Urban Bourbonist. They're in the middle of a membership drive, and I've been a member of Bourbon Charity for a year and a half or 2 years, for quite some time. Kind of really excited about what they're doing, and then I've got some other folks. When we get later in the year, I'm going to try to have some of the guys from Bourbon Lens maybe come and talk to me at some point in time. Got Morgan from Female Whiskey Society. Been super excited about that. That's one of the things that feels sort of unique about the whiskey podcasting environment, is that most of the folks that you talk to are super open and available to having conversations, even with people who have a small platform. When I say small platform, this is the epitome of a small platform. I think I have maybe 30 or 40 subscribers on YouTube, and I probably have 20 or 30 regular podcast subscribers for the audio version. I think it's 50 when I start include streaming platforms. So the numbers are really, really low, but most of the people that I've talked to are, they just want to talk about it. They have a passion for what they're doing, and they're willing to do that. And so it's super, super exciting to have those things. But before we get too far down the rabbit hole of what I've been doing and why I'm doing it, I was like, how do you celebrate a year of doing this, like sitting in a room talking to yourself? And I was able to pick up some vintage whiskey. That's where we went with, and it's nothing, super exciting, but I was able to pick up an old Jim Beam decanter. It's from 1975. We'll give it a shot. May have some lead poisoning here, so this could be the 1 year anniversary and the final recording of the episode. Got a couple of other things going on here. Got some of my single oak project with Cole and Robbie. I shared with them, and then I've got an Elijah Craig single barrel proof that was from a local store that was picked here. So that's what it is. That's where I'm at. I'm just gonna celebrate, and if you're here drinking along with me, I appreciate it. If you're not, maybe you will later on. Probably won't find me giving any tasting notes because I'm not very good at that. I was able to join the guys from Bourbon Lens last night with a tasting with Few Spirits. That was super entertaining. Their master distiller, head of their company, whatever you call him, is a very engaging and fun character. But what I found, I've had a few other things. I've talked about some of their bottles before. They have an American whiskey that is possibly one of the most interesting tastes that I've had in a while. Whenever I wrote down my tasting note, I immediately went to a Kansas City barbecue that's been smoked. And I don't necessarily mean the actual meat portion of it. It wasn't necessarily that it was savory enough to be full-on ribs, but there was a sweetness, there was a smokiness to it, and there was a number of spices in there that sort of kicked in. And what he described is it's sort of a Bourye mixed with a single malt thrown in there for good measure. So it's got a ratio that creates that. And fingers crossed for no lead poisoning. The thing is, I was reading about lead poisoning before I started drinking this, and the symptoms of lead poisoning are very similar to the symptoms of alcohol intoxication. They just last longer. So if you feel like you're drunk for slightly longer than you probably should be, there's a chance you have lead poisoning. But most of the time, the lead poisoning comes from the crystal decanters more than it does from these porcelain ones, because the porcelain ones only have lead poisoning generically. I'm not a scientist here, but what I read, they will only have potential lead problems for ones that were faulty, and they usually don't make it out of the factory. Even in the 70s, they didn't make it out of the factory because they wouldn't hold together. It's just a poor firing situation that created that problem. So, when I started on this journey, I tried to set some realistic goals about what I was doing here and what was a measure of success. And that's a thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about in my day-to-day employment. The thing that actually pays the bills is setting realistic goals and then achieving them. And early on, I had Post-it notes up on the wall, and the goal was 1 released episode, 5 released episode, 10 released episodes, and I tried to do a 1, 5, 10 for all 3 of the things. So it was released episodes, downloads from people, listens from people, and then reviews. And realistically, for releasing, downloading, and listening, those were all pretty easy goals to meet. But what I found is that reviews, for whatever reason, are more difficult. And it's not just me. You see some of the much larger podcasts, if you've got thousands and thousands of followers and you only have 20 or 30 reviews, whether they be positive or negative, that gives you, kind of an idea of what the percentage looks like. And so maybe I didn't do enough kind of looking from the onset of what is a realistic goal for catching reviews. It's tough to convince people to go out and take an action to say, hey, I like or hate this particular person. I like or hate this particular podcast or whatever it is, whatever the people are doing. I like it, I don't like it, whatever. But most of those goals were pretty easy to do. I mean, the releasing is a thing that I am entirely in control of. And I also kind of set a secondary goal of record every single week for the duration of the year, and that became somewhat unrealistic as we got into summer, and my wife is a school teacher, and my kids are home for the summer, and trying to sit down and do these things while we're vacation, whatever else happens. And it was super tough. Yeah, we will have our, hey, you know what? Zachary Jones, thank you for being here. Have our 1-year anniversary together at Bourbon Fest this year. I actually have my Bourbon Fest Glen. It's sitting right here. It's waiting with a pour in it. And absolutely, we'll try to coordinate to wear matching shirts again, but they'll be different matching shirts than the last time. Maybe we'll see if we can work that out. Maybe there'll be Whiskey Weekend Batch 4 shirts or something along that lines. We'll figure something else out. We'll probably have a few more drinks together this time, because I will likely not bring my spouse. Not that I don't want her to come, but it just wasn't her thing, and it was definitely my thing. So in the last year, this is, solely, these are the parts that can't be attributed to me. These are parts that are attributed to the folks that are in this live stream, the folks that are listening to audio podcasts. I've done no social networking with people that I know. There are very, very few people in my immediate sphere of influence that know that I do this, aside from my spouse, aside from my brother, who doesn't listen. He's a sort of a teetotaler, so that's really not an option for him. But aside from that, I haven't done any of that because I wanted to get a realistic view of how many strangers can I convince to listen to what I'm doing. And over the last year, I've had, a little less than 600 downloads of the podcast, which is a number that I would have thought was completely unrealistic. And then for non-downloading platforms, there's been, 40 or 50 streams, which means every episode, if I look at an average, because this is the 40th episode right now, where we're at, Savant Slayer shirts. You want to do Savant Slayer shirt? Is that what we're after? I think I can work that out. If nothing else, I'll make one myself. It's fine. But I've had at least one episode streamed on some non-download platform. We're averaging over 10 downloads per episode, and these are numbers for for folks like Scott at Bourbon Lens. They're seeing largely significant more numbers than that. But after a year of sitting here and just talking to myself, I feel pretty good about that, and I feel feel like these are pretty solid achievements. It really feels like I'm trying to stroke my own ego here, but at the end of the day, I'm doing whatever I want to do, and you guys just happen to be along for the ride, and I super appreciate it. YouTube was a thing that I've kicked off here more recently, and I'm not sure how to fully utilize this platform to its greatest benefit, but I enjoy sitting here having these conversations, converting something that was audio into video, and man, there's a rabbit hole that you can run down real fast with what these things are. But as a positive byproduct, the things that I've been able to I don't want to say directly do because of this, but Zachary Jones even touched on it here in the chat, is that, I was able to meet him at hitting the hockey stick curve upward soon. If I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. I've hit the measure of success that I want for this. If it doesn't gain any more following than this right in here, I'll still keep doing it until I just get tired of it. But I was able to meet a person that I otherwise would never have met. He gave me a couple of handshakes of stuff. We sat down, had a conversation at Kentucky Bourbon Fest this year. Would have never known who this guy was aside from happening to be in some of the same chats for Bourbon Junkies or wherever else. But the odds of us connecting are much smaller, and I've been able to meet Matt, who is the Bourbon Jeeper on Instagram, and he now works for Penelope. I was able to meet him, and I was able to meet Jack, who is the Hood Sommelier. And these are all people I've met in real life, and Tim, the Single Barrel Snob. These are people I've met in real life, and I would consider them more than an acquaintance at this point. They would be people that if I see them out, I would probably sit down, we'll have a drink, we'll have a conversation, have real conversations with people. And that's what I think that this particular type of community is realistically all about. One of the other things that I was able to do is I was able to guest host an episode of Chill Filtered that Cole and Robbie usually record. Cole's wife gave birth to a child over the summer, and Robbie said, hey, I'd been interacting with them just because I listened to their podcast and I enjoyed it, and I'd listened to it before I had a podcast. It was one of those, most of the folks that I Patreon, I will listen to them for 4 or 5 months, and if it's something that I continually go back to, then I'll start sending money to them because obviously they're creating content that I appreciate and I want to be a part of. And so that it sort of happened. They're like, hey, you've got a podcast. We've got some time that we needed to fill. Had an opportunity to sit down with Robbie, and then later on, a couple episodes back, they came and did a live on this episode, and it was super fun. I had a great time, and that's the thing that I'm hoping by, doing some of these interviews that I've got lined up, is that I'll be able to have those conversations face to face, because those are fun. Those are not me just talking to myself here in a dark room where I've created something. When I started this out, I do a lot of talking for work. If you can't tell, I do a whole lot of talking for work. And so I started off with just a series of notes. But what I found is what happens at work often is that I will start to ramble if my notes are not clear enough. And so I started recording the podcast just with notes. And then I went to an explicit script so that way I could stay on task, not have a significant number of pauses, verbal pauses, like just right then, and be able to edit a little more clearly. And then as I progressed forward, and then I started moving into doing the YouTube streams, they feel significantly more artificial and they feel more limited. And so I stopped doing the scripting. And so it was weird to see how that sort of adjusted to its own thing. But it allows it to have, to me, a more conversational feel, which is what I appreciate. With the guys at Bourbon Lens, it's about whiskey, but it's also about a couple of guys talking. With Cole and Robbie, it's about whiskey, but it's also about a couple of guys talking over at Chill Filtered. Same thing with This Is My Bourbon podcast. Sometimes the best parts of what Perry and Eric, or Perry and Swan, or Perry and Eric and Swan happen to do are the conversations that have nothing to do with whiskey. And so that's the thing that, over the course of the next year, hopefully I'll have enough people joining me that I can have those conversations and have something a little more familial, a little more entertaining for me. And then the other thing that I've done that has been sort of an offshoot of this is I've done a handful. I did a blind tasting with Cole and Robbie from Chillfield on this episode, and I'm hoping to do that with a number of other people. So Zachary Jones, if you want to join me one night, I will send you some samples from an episode, and we'll talk through it, and you can taste them. Scott, anybody who wants, just reach out. Absolutely reach out, and I will send some stuff. You join, we'll record something, or we'll live stream it, or we'll do whatever, because those are just fun. But I've also done a whole bunch of blind tastings for work now, which started off as a virtual blind tasting, ended up with now I am doing face-to-face ones now that we're able to, with being allowed to travel and do all of those things. And that's the other thing that's going to happen in 2022 that's going to probably require me to be a little bit more focused. Like, I've started planning out, and I think I've got enough content to get me into May at this point. Not necessarily, not recorded, just planned, to help alleviate the fact that I've got at least 3 work trips that are going to span over when I would normally record. So I'm going to have to get ahead of things. I'm going to have to actually put some things in the bucket and make sure that I can release something on an evening. And I've got ideas for those, But there's things like Whiskey Weekend Batch 4, going to attend that. Super excited about the opportunity to, kind of hang out with some of those folks. I walk this weird line where whenever you go to these things, like when I got to meet Jack from Hood Sommelier, thanks Chainsaw. Hey, thanks Eric. Eric is so Chainsaw in the Woods is Eric. He's one of my local friends. He's one of the few local friends that know that this exists. I appreciate you being here tonight. But one of the weird things is, like, if I meet people in real life, I'm trying not to make it about social media engagement or pointing out, hey, I know this person now. I was able to hang out with them and do this thing, which I guess I completely destroyed that tonight by talking about it. But in the moment, it's about interacting with those folks. And so opportunities like Whiskey Weekend Batch 4 or Kentucky Bourbon Festival or some of the travel opportunities or any of the meetups that are likely going to occur in the next year are a chance for me to legitimately interact with those people without having to have this artificial barrier between us. And you'll likely see Eric at some point in time. I'm going to try to have him join me one night for a tasting. And Scott, absolutely. MacBooks are the way to go. The only downside is that most external webcams, if you try to get one, like to come in a regular USB. They don't have USB-C, so you have to either have a docking station of some type or whatever. But that's what we use for work. So I've got one that's what I'm staring into right here, and it seems to handle it just fine. So, I've rambled on for 28 minutes with little to no content. Most people that I've had in chat at one point in time, I super appreciate everybody being here tonight. Like I said, next week we're going to have, I say we, like there's another person in the room, it's just me. Next week I'm going to have Alan Bishop from the Spirits of French Lick here, master distiller. It's going to be absolutely fun. Probably going to have to go ahead and mark that as explicit because that's just who he is, and I super enjoy it. But we'll talk about his whiskeys. We'll talk about a number of different things. He's super into history of whiskey, and I'm super into it as well. It's probably going to be a little bit nerdy. You may or may not like it, but it'll be fun. Right after that, Chris Blattner from Bourbon Charity. We'll talk about their membership drive, the positive things that they've been doing, some of the amazing bottle giveaways that they do as a part of their charity drives, kind of the foundational concepts of it. Like I said, we've got Morgan from Female Whiskey Society, coming up in at a later point in time. I can't remember what date I put for that. Probably going to have the guys from This Is My Bourbon podcast are going to come and join me. A lot of people have said yes. Like I said, I was super surprised that everybody's just like, yeah, absolutely, I'll join, because they're already running their own things. How do they have time to agree to do these as well, especially for someone with a small platform? But that's what's been super exciting about the year. It's been interesting. It's been a stress at some times, but it's not been something that I've ever wanted to stop doing. So we'll close it out there. I think we, I keep saying we like there's another person. It's not. It's just me. But thanks for joining me tonight or today or whenever you happen to catch this. I hope you found this episode entertaining. And if you did, please leave me a review on whatever platform you have to be consuming this on. You can leave a comment if possible. You can hit me up on social media on Twitter or Instagram using EmbellishPod or even TikTok. Not sure what that platform's for, but I'm giving it a shot. And you can give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and I'll be back at it again next week with a new offering. It'll be Alan Bishop from the Spirits of French Lick joining me to talk about what he's got going on. So until then, cheers and thanks for hanging out.